What's up, everyone? Jeremy Gerard from Mythic Customs here with one of my short customizing tutorial videos. In this video, we're going to go on a shopping spree. Well, not really a shopping spree. We're going to talk about shopping. 'Tis the season. As I'm recording it, it's the holiday season. A lot of people are making their Christmas lists, looking for things to get other people. So I figured it would be a good time to do a video that was really focused on if you were going to get started with customizing. Right? Where would you begin in terms of supplies? Because let's be honest, customizing is not an inexpensive hobby. I totally support people getting into customizing Mythic Legions, but it's definitely not a way to save money in the long run. When you get into customizing, you certainly are going to buy more figures to fuel your creative ideas, but you're also going to need some supplies. And that's not unlike any hobby out there. Any hobby that you would get involved with, you need certain equipment or supplies or what have you. And customizing is no different. Now, you can go on a spiral. You could spend a ton of money getting paints and materials for customizing. It's not strictly necessary. I think that you can make a smaller investment up front and really get a lot of the things that you're going to ultimately need. So what I did for this video was I picked some of the things that if I was starting fresh, knowing what I know now, these are the things that I would start with. The first thing you're going to need to start with is some paints, because a big part of customizing is going to be painting. So you're going to need some paints. And there's a few ways that you can do this. I've got multiple videos here on my channel about painting techniques and different paints and brushes and everything that I use. So some of this might be a little repetitive. Ultimately, when it comes to paints, I always break it down that there's really two options. You either have what I call the hobby store paints, which are typically more expensive and usually better quality. And then you also have what I call the craft store paints, which are less expensive and lesser quality. But even though they may be lesser quality paints, depending on what you're using them for, they might be exactly what you need. I use tons of those paints in my work. So I think there's room for both of them. When it comes to paints, you're going to realize that customizers typically have their specific choices, things that they started with, and that's what they use. For me, I really use this brand called Vallejo. Vallejo is the hobby store type brand that I really prefer. There's other people that really like Citadel or really like Army Painter. Those are all great paints as well. I've used them sparingly, but because I started with Vallejo, that's really what I know. So I'm going to make a recommendation. If you don't want to start with Vallejo, maybe you were a miniature painter in the past and you use Citadel and you're comfortable with that, you can absolutely just substitute those paints in for the ones I'm suggesting. Because what I am suggesting is start with a set. So this is a set. This is just basic. It's a Vallejo set, colors for models and miniatures. This set is something I got on Amazon, paid about $50 for this set. So if you look at it, this thing here has 16 different bottles in this package for about 50 bucks. Now, if you buy these bottles individually, they're going to run you anywhere from $4 to $8. So if you break it down to the price you pay per tube for a set like this, it's a lot less expensive. Now, down the road, if you only need one paint, say you're out of red and you just need the red, it may not make sense to buy a whole set just to replace that red. That's why there are times where I do buy individual bottles. But to get started, or if you're looking to replace a whole bunch of colors, a lot of times these sets are the way to go. So that would be the first thing that I would do, is I would buy yourself a good quality set of paints like this. Again, this Vallejo paint set, excuse me, that I got on Amazon was like 50 bucks. And as you can see, I'm going to get black, white, green, purple, red, blue, silver, really kind of a rainbow of colors to really help me out here. That's where I would start. Now, the next thing I would do is I would actually go to a craft store, like a Michael's Crafts, and I would look at their paint selection. There might be some very specific colors that you want that won't be in a general paint set like you started with. That's where you can use the craft store. So this is one that I got from Michaels. This is a Craft Smart paint. This color happens to be tin metallic. I use this one all the time. A lot of the dry brushing that I do, this is absolutely what I use. I love the Craft Store metallics, especially when you're dry brushing, because you're putting on so little paint as part of that technique that a higher quality paint, it doesn't really matter at all. Literally any paint at that point will work as long as it's acrylic. Now, that is one important thing. When you are buying these paints, you want acrylic paints. You do not want enamels. Enamels are meant to go on like models, like model cars and planes, that hard plastic. They will eat away the plastic at these type of figures. So you absolutely want acrylic paints. But as long as they're acrylics, really any of them that you're going to use for dry brushing, you can make work. Even these cheaper paints, if you're using them for larger coverage pieces, water them down a little bit, thin it out so you can get a nice smooth texture, put on a couple layers. You can literally make any paint work if you are patient. So start with some paints. Get yourself a set, grab some other paints selectively based on the colors that you need. Brushes. Brushes are going to be the next thing. I really love these brushes from Testers. These are something, I've bought them in Michaels in the past. I've bought them on Amazon. I've bought them on eBay. It's a 3-pack of brushes from Testers. It comes in 3 sizes, a 10, an 8, and a 2. And they're really flat. So much of the work that I do is dry brushing. These brushes work wonderful for dry brushing type techniques. I've got one right here. I'll show you. That's kind of what the tip looks like. So it's a nice flat tip. I absolutely love these. So get yourself some brushes. Now, these, I think this is like $8 for these 3 brushes. They're not expensive. You can go into a craft store. You can get a giant, bag of 20 brushes for probably $5 and spend a lot less. I did that when I first started. I will absolutely tell you that a higher quality brush, and it doesn't have to be like a crazy art store brush that's going to run you $30, $40 per brush. That might be a little unnecessary, but something that's a little bit higher than the bottom of the barrel brushes at a craft store, I think you're going to find are way easier to use for you. And especially when you're first starting out, you don't want to be fighting against your products, your tools that you're using, your paints and your paint brushes. If they're making the job harder on you in those earliest stages, you're more likely to lose that ambition, to lose that enthusiasm, and say, you know what, this isn't working the way I wanted it to. So you really want to start with projects you can execute to build up that confidence and make sure you have the tools you need to help you do it. In addition to those tools, I also would get a smaller, finer tipped brush. These are for things like eyes or really fine detail work where you don't want a large flat brush. You want a really small, narrow pointed brush. For those, I use these here. This is a brand called Winsor & Newton. It is the Series 7 brush. This is the size 000, which is the smallest one they sell. I get these from eBay. These are a little bit more expensive. These brushes will probably run you in the $10 to $20 per brush range. Totally worth it for that fine detail work. I love these. So that combination of a few of those flat brushes along with the really fine brush, super helpful. Other things you're going to want to get. Blue tack. I did a video on this recently about how to use blue tack to attach custom heads, custom resin heads onto Mythic Legions bodies. Someone actually commented, do you really have to do a video about how to use blue tack? Because it is pretty basic. But the reality is this is one of the most common questions I hear from new customizers is I just bought a custom head. The neck port is much larger than the neck ball of the Mythic Legions. That's by design. It's so those more fragile resin pieces, you don't force it on and potentially crack them. The easiest way to attach it, it was with a little blue tack. People ask me about this all the time. So you can check out the video about how to use it, but make sure you get some of these. This pack is like $3 on Amazon. This will last you, trust me, for probably 50 customs. Next, an Xacto Blade. Love these things. Super, super helpful. Get an Xacto blade. Get some fresh blades. They come with a lot of times there's different shape blades. I'll be honest with you. This standard blade is the one that I use 99% of the time. I just like to make sure I have a fresh supply of them because especially if you're going to be cutting something that requires some precision, having a really fresh blade on plastic that's a little softened up with some heat makes the job so much easier. Not every custom is going to require you to cut it apart or slice pieces or anything like that, but trust me, this is a tool that will come in handy. Super glue. You never know when you're going to need one of these in your customs. Sometimes you might be attaching a limb or a piece, like say you're putting a hand that's not a standard Mythic Legions hand on and it doesn't plug in, and you're going to just glue it into that wrist point, knowing that you're going to lose an articulation point, but you're really going for aesthetics, so you accept that. Super glue is super helpful. This is the brand that I really like. This is Crazy Glue, and it actually comes it comes apart in the package, but I really like this particular tube. Once you open it up, you just pop that little kind of pin in it to keep it fresh. And it's got this little red base. So when I'm working, I can just put it right on my table. And then when I'm done, just cap it up. I buy these at a variety of places. I've bought them at Michael's Crafts in the past. Heck, I've bought it at like Family Dollar in the past. That's the glue I like. Certainly other glues will work as well. This is the one that I happen to use. A Dremel, okay? This, I would say, is maybe more of an optional tool. You're not going to, like the Xacto Blade, you're not going to use it all the time, but I find this tool super, super helpful. And if you talk to any customizer that's doing anything more than just simple pop and swaps or simple adding a head on and that's about it, they probably have and use a Dremel. Dremel is a name brand. This is like basically a rotary tool. There are other brands as well. Dremel is like the industry standard, so that's what I went with. You don't have to spend a lot of money on this. To be honest with you, this is my second Dremel. My first one I had was the bottom of the barrel Dremel there was. It was probably like a $15 tool. I had it for 10 years. Used it effectively for a very long time. I had it before I was customizing Mythic Legions, and it lasted me forever. It died somewhat recently, and I upgraded to this one. But even this one, the model that I had, I couldn't replace it because they didn't make it anymore. The model that I ended up getting, this is probably like a $50 Dremel, so it's not a huge expense. I bought a couple different bits for it, specifically this kind of like grinding bit that is meant to like hollow out stuff. That's the most common thing you do, is hollowing out heads and stuff like that. Super, super effective. So a Dremel, a rotary tool, that is something else that I would recommend. I don't have a picture of it here, but I would also recommend some protective gear. When you're doing this stuff, some rubber gloves, some masks. Keep those handy, because especially if you're using the Dremel and you're dremeling out resin, that is going to kick up some dust that you do not want to breathe in, okay? You're going to want to put that mask on. So in addition to all of these, spend a few dollars and get some protective gear just to make sure that you are covered. Never a bad idea to wear gloves when you're working with these pieces. Certainly a mask if you are modifying it in any way where it's going to kick up dust. Besides that, paint trays. This is my incredibly used paint tray. You can see I do a pretty poor job of scraping out the paint when I'm done. I kind of dig the way it looks though, so that's why I leave it that way. Paint tray to hold the paint. That's another simple thing that you can buy. Outside of that, I would say that everything else is optional. You know, there are other things that you can use along the way. This is a kind of paint that I love, or it's not even a paint. It's really just kind of an overcoat, a gloss overcoat. I use this. I've done videos about this. I use this when I want to make things shiny, like horns or eyes or teeth. Awesome, awesome thing. Not necessary to get started with. There's a lot of stuff like this that you're going to add to your workshop, to your tool bench, or whatever you want to call it, over time. But the items that I just mentioned, you're probably looking at a sub $200 investment. Okay, a lot of it you can probably go to a Michael's Crafts and you can get a bunch of this. You can get that Xacto knife. You might even be able to get the Dremel there. Certainly you can get a Dremel on Amazon or at a Home Depot or a Lowe's, something like that. But for everything that I just showed today, you're looking at sub $200. Now, of course, you need the figures as well. So you're going to have to buy the Mythic Legions figures and the fodder and all that stuff. But from a supply standpoint, this is how I would begin if I was starting fresh today. So whether you are going shopping for yourself to start to build up your custom toolbox, or whether you are making a Christmas list so your significant other or your friends and family can buy you stuff that you actually want for Christmas, these are hopefully some of the things that you can put on your list. I will put some links to some of the stuff that I've shown today. I'll put the links to buy them on Amazon or wherever I find them in the actual description of this video to hopefully make that helpful as well. But once again, these are examples. Paint set, Dremel, these type of things, these are the type of things you would want. Certainly you can do your research to figure out which ones work best for you. Hopefully you find it helpful. If you do find this video helpful and videos like this helpful, let me know by giving the video a like. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. And certainly if you are not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Until next time, I can't wait to see what you make.